Can a free plugin sound like a $4,000 analog synthesizer? Well, you tell me. First things first, we're going to talk about what gives an analog synthesizer its tone. The answer is its oscillators, its filters, and the imperfections that these elements have in an analog synthesizer, especially an old vintage one. Now, I recorded a Moog Minimoog Voyager, which costs around $4,000 used. And it has all sorts of imperfections, detuning, harmonic saturation, all of which make up for its unmistakably vintage, warm, analog sound. Now the question is, can you recreate all that with a free software plugin? Let's dive right into it and find out. Okay, now we're Ableton Live land, and I have a project open here. This is the recording of the analog synthesizer, the Moog Minimoog Voyager, and underneath it are the MIDI track that I used to record the synth. So the way I recorded the synth was via a MIDI interface. I connected a MIDI cable into the back of the synth, and I had the session playing. MIDI was being sent into the synthesizer was producing the sound, and I was capturing that sound back into Ableton Live. I know it's a sin, I recorded it into Ableton Live and not Pro Tools, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And so this is basically the end result. And the question now is, can we recreate it with a free software synthesizer? Now what we're gonna use is Vital. What is Vital? Vital is a synthesizer that is free, obviously, and I really love it. It's the synthesizer that I use all the time. And for those of you who use Serum, this may look a bit familiar. So without going too in depth with this, you have your oscillators here, oscillator 1, 2, and 3. You've got your filters here, filter 1 and 2. Got some envelopes over here, 1, 2, and 3. You got your LFOs here. You got this randomization section, which we're gonna use a lot of. And over here you got some effects, and then here this is the matrix. This is where you can do some pretty in-depth routing. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the waveform of the Voyager to begin understanding how we can recreate that sound. As a reminder, this is how it sounds. So how do we even get started, right? This is how Vital sounds. And I'm gonna use the same MIDI track that I used to record the Voyager to be fair in this comparison. So this is what Vital sounds right now. So right off the bat, it's completely different. First thing we can do by ear is realize that it's in the wrong octave. So what we're gonna do, let's go to our oscillator up here, and we're gonna turn the pitch down 12, and here's what that sounds like. So now we're in the correct octave, and the most fundamental ways we can change the sound of a synthesizer is the waveform of the oscillator. Now, let's have a look in the original waveform of the Minimoog Voyager. If I zoom in a little bit, we can see the shape of the waveform. So maybe you can call this cheating, but I don't. And if we look closely, it doesn't look like a saw wave. It kind of looks like a square wave, but it kind of looks inconsistent, right? So there's a shorter positive square here, and then a longer negative square, shorter positive, longer negative, but also it kind of starts very short, and then it elongates a little bit, longer here, although it was shorter here. So what I derive from this is that there's some pulse width modulation going on, and it's getting modulated, it's moving, which either is something that happened on purpose which means that I did it, or it's due to its old vintage nature, because it's an analog synthesizer, and sometimes inconsistencies like this just happen, right? But if we're trying to recreate that sound, we need to figure out a way to recreate that inconsistency. First thing we're gonna do is go to our waveform over here, and we're gonna go to pulse width. What that's gonna give us is a square wave here that we can change the width of, right? Let's hear how it sounds before we do anything. So it doesn't quite sound like the Voyager at all, right? It doesn't sound like the Voyager at all, but what if we play with the pulse width? We get much closer actually, just by playing with the pulse width modulation. Now, a couple of important things to note. An analog synthesizer doesn't always have a perfect phase correlation unless you are syncing the phase. What that means is, it doesn't always start at the 0 point every time I hit a key, right? Sometimes it starts at the 0 point, sometimes it starts in the top of the wave, sometimes it might start on the bottom of the wave. And in a soft synth, that is reflected here in the phase. This percentage here, if I put it all the way down to 0%, that means that there is zero randomization. It always starts at the 0 point of the wave. If I pull it up to 100%, it emulates an analog synthesizer where it starts at a random point of the wave. We want it at 100%, right? But also we want to randomize the pulse width, because that's what we saw here in the waveform, right? Kind of starts in the positive quite short here with a longer negative, and then it elongates a little bit, so it goes closer to this, and then it moves again a little bit. So basically we need our oscillator to do this. Now the way to do that is with a random LFO over here. So if I hit play, you'll notice that it generates a random voltage here, and we can route that to the pulse width, and you can change the direction that it's going to go, or you can make it bipolar, so it'll go on both directions, which is what I'm going to do, because if we want true randomization, it might go down or it might go up. So this is what it sounds like now, and we'll play with the percentage. Versus the Voyager. Now what we also hear in the original Voyager is a detuning of the oscillator, and I believe that there might be two oscillators. Now as you can see here, the Minimoog Voyager has three oscillators. One is a sub-oscillator and the other two are normal. Not only do we have three oscillators here, we have a fourth noise oscillator, and that's on, so I used that. What does that mean? There's some white noise playing. An envelope, both for the oscillator, but also for the filter. So we'll keep that in mind. And there seems to be an LFO, which we'll get back to in a moment. If I hit play, and compare that to the original, it just sounds way too sterile. So what I believe is happening is we're missing the oscillator. So I'm gonna turn on the second and third one. I'm gonna keep the second one as another pulse width oscillator, And I'm also going to connect the randomization to that, make it bipolar. So now there's two oscillators. They're doing a pulse width modulation. They start at the same place, sorta, right? If we can make it perfect, but that would make it some more digital versus an old vintage analog, because they're never perfect. I'm also going to turn the randomization the other way. So it gets randomized by the same amount, but moving the opposite way, right? So now we have this. Now, obviously, this is an octave higher, the second oscillator. Let's see if that is accurate. No, it just sounds like both oscillators are tuned down by an octave. Can you hear how the oscillators started phasing with each other? That's a cool sound, makes it sound kind of analog, but I don't know if we want that. It sounds like in the original, the two oscillators are synced and they're not canceling each other out. So how do we do that in the software world? Well, that's a good fucking question. When two oscillators are synced with each other, that is called a hard sync. Now, how do you do that in the software world? Well, in Vital, you can't. But there is a workaround. What we can do is turn down phase randomization. So now they're always in phase, right? But what we can do is grab another randomization here and route that on the phase, and they're both going to get their phase randomized by the same amount. So they are hard synced while still randomized. So that's the workaround on that. Now let's go back to the Minimoog. Notice the waveform. Notice how it gets louder and then softer and then louder and then softer. Notice that. It sounds like the lower note gets louder and then it just falls back and then it gets louder again. Notice that. Listen to the lower note. It sounds like there's a high-pass filter with a resonance oscillating and moving with an LFO, boosting that lower note and then taking it away. So let's recreate that. So we're going to turn on our filter. We're going to turn it into a high-pass filter, resonance, and let's play it and find the... Oh, also, we're going to turn on the filter for both oscillators. So both oscillators go into this filter. And let's play around and find the spot where it sort of sounds like that. So it kind of sounds like that. So let's create an LFO here. We're going to change the mode from trigger because that's not going to help us. This is what that does. Every time a note is hit, the LFO resets. We don't want that. What we want is for it to just keep looping. The way to do that is to choose sync. And then we can change the frequency here to something that resembles this better. We can very accurately figure out the rate for this. Now it looks like a full cycle, so from the loudest point to the next loudest point is about 1.5 seconds. So we're going to do a LFO here 1.5 seconds long. We're being very scientific about this. Also, it seems to be a smooth transition from loud to soft to loud. So it might be a triangle, it might be it's definitely not a saw, it might be a sine wave. Let's see how that sounds. So we're gonna pick the high point and then the low point here. And this is how the original one sounds. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the envelope. The envelope in the original one is much, much shorter, at least in this section of the song, versus ours. And the attack is so short, there's almost, you can sort of hear the glitching, right? From the oscillators, like trying to open up in time. So we're gonna go here to our envelope, turn the attack all the way down, turn the sustain all the way down, and make it much, much shorter with the decay. That sounds closer. Now, I want to play with the pulse width to make it sound fuller. The analog one sounds a bit fuller. Cool, we're kind of getting there, right? Let's do some more randomization to make it sound closer to the hardware. What you can do is randomize the envelopes. So we're going to drag the random one here that we used for our pulse width. And it's cool when we use the same seed, the same random to a bunch of different parameters, because they all get randomized, but there's like a common denominator to everything, and it makes the sound more sort of cohesive a little bit. So what we're going to do is drag that random one to the decay over here, and we don't want any crazy numbers. Like, we want to make it bipolar so it moves both ways, but we want a very slight randomization here. Something like that. And then we can also do the same for the release, just a little bit, make it bipolar just a little bit. And then also the attack, right? That one maybe less so. Cool. So we're getting there. The Minimoog sounds a little bit less bright. So we're reaching a point where the envelope opens up a little bit, so we can recreate this here with our decay. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I'm playing around with the third oscillator because it's a sub-oscillator in the Voyager. I also turn it into pulse width, square wave, and then turn it down to -24, so it's an octave below the other two. And it kind of sounds like this now. Now, if we listen to the original one versus ours, Ours has a brighter, more aggressive sound. So what we're going to do is turn on a filter, a low pass filter this time, and it kind of sounds like this. So it's closer. This is the original. This is ours. Right? In the original, it sounds like the envelope is also connected to the filter. So the filter moves a little bit with the amplifier. So we're gonna connect the envelope here to the filter position. I'm gonna turn it the other way and let's see how that sounds. So that's what it kind of sounds like right now. There might be white noise here. Okay, we're getting closer there. We're getting much closer. So there is noise and it sounds like I'm playing with a filter there, opening it up. I think Moogs are famous for their 24 dB filter. So I just changed my low pass filter to 24 dB to sound more like a Moog filter. It sounds like there's more of a portamento. Man, Moogs have a very specific sound. The oscillators have a very specific sound. The filters have a very specific sound. What I can try playing with is some distortion and see if we can get closer to that sound with distortion. There might be some chorusing. Bingo. Chorus. Chorus makes a huge difference here. Listen to the original and then I'm going to switch to the soft synth. This is the original. This is the soft synth. So chorus makes a huge difference here. Now let's try playing with a distortion here. The synth we're creating, the chorus makes it sound stereo, whereas the Minimoog was recorded in mono. The way I'm gonna make up for that here is I'm gonna split stereo pan mode and I'm gonna bring both left and right down to middle. So I'm gonna turn both to 0. And here's what that sounds like. And that brings it much closer to the original sound. So it sounds like the left and the right being combined into one channel is a big part of the sound. Now the Moog sounds are very mid-rangey and forward, whereas mine sounds more bright. Let's cheat a little bit. Let's create a new track and we are going to resample from number 6, Vital. And the reason why I'm going to do that is to have a look at the waveform. So let's record it. All right, so we nailed the high pass filter, which sort of boosts the lows here. You can see when the filter goes to the low note and boosts that, the waveform becomes more spread apart, which means there's longer frequencies, therefore lower frequencies. So we've nailed that aspect of the sound. Seems to be different in our sound, which is the bottom one, is that it is longer. So we're gonna adjust for that in our decay. So let's try recording that. Now the length seems to be much closer here. The start is a bit off, but if we adjust for that here, then we get much closer. The length seems to be pretty much spot on. Maybe ours is a little bit longer, but that's also like the randomization playing a part, because sometimes it's like spot on, like kind of here, the kind of spot on. Whereas here it looks to be a little bit longer, which is fine. We have nailed sort of the randomization of the waveform, maybe a little bit more in ours. You see how sometimes the negative is longer here, sometimes it is shorter here, sometimes the positive is longer, sometimes the positive is shorter. There are some peaks in the waveform that seem to happen on the beginning of the cycle. So you see how it's not flat like ours is. There's like a whoop, there's like a peak, and then it drops a little bit. If I click on edit, I can play with the waveform itself. And I'm gonna do that to all of them. And by the way, this is just like me discovering, messing around. Synthesis is a lot about messing around and just discovering things and happy accidents. So let's see how that makes the sound different. I don't know about you guys, but that made it sound much, much closer to the original. Let's record that. Let's record that. See what that sounds like. Right? This is our synth. Here's the original. So we're close. We're very close. A big part of the analog of the Minimoog Voyager was me holding the sustain knob and then just bringing it up and performing with it and twisting it and playing with it. And so when I play with that here, what we can do is I'll record it in the other track and I'll play with it in the soft synth the same way that I played with it on the Moog, and then we can compare that with the original and see how close we can get. And then what I'm hearing is some resonance in the mids that's making the Moog different. And the way we can achieve that maybe is with cheating. Maybe we can add another plugin after it, perhaps Roar, and then distort the mids in a way that makes it sound closer to the Moog. There's no rules in music production, right? The challenge to myself was if I can make it sound like the Moog in the plugin, and maybe I can by messing around with the waveform, like going in here in the waveform and just messing around with the shape. Maybe that'll help. Kind of don't want to mess up what we've created so far, and maybe we'll do that after the fact. So for now, let's just try playing with the sustain a little bit. Record here our track, and let's perform the part. Let's perform the part. We've performed it. Let's see what it sounds like. Let's see what the original sounds like at this part. And this is what ours sounds like. That's pretty close, isn't it? I mean, it looks different. And the biggest difference is the volume. We've already created the LFO with the filter that has the exact same timing with those volume changes. So what we can do is grab that LFO and put it on the level of each oscillator. And we'll do it by a little bit so we don't clip our plugin too much. We still might. I'm just gonna bring it down. See how that sounds like. Cool. And now what I'm gonna do differently this time is watch the waveform of the original, and whenever I see it get denser and denser, what I'm gonna do is pull up the sustain. it looks, yeah, now it looks much closer to the original, but I could hear the third oscillator being a little bit too loud. So what we're gonna do that same thing, turn the third oscillator down a little bit. Yeah, that's plenty, and we can cheat a little bit, accentuate the volume increase and decrease. We can use that same LFO and just put it on our output. Now they look much, much closer. You can see the volume increasing and decreasing. Now, obviously it's not the same, but let's see how close we got without the mid-range thing, the Moog mid-range thing that we were talking about. This is the original. And this is ours. Original. Ours. Ours. Original. If I were trying to use any and all tools in my disposal to make that sound, here's what I would do. I would find the mid-range. And then I would probably add like a chorus or something. Definitely not this one. So the volcano, which is even more like, which is basically like an analog filter. What I'm gonna do is a bell here. I think I got it as close as I could. Here's what I was able to get. Here is the original Voyager. And here's our recreation. This is a digital synthesizer. So what I'm gonna do is print the damn thing and then we can do a comparison. Nice. And this pass actually looks much, much closer to the original in terms of volume. And if I zoom in a little bit, it looks different, guys. It looks different, but also kind of similar. But here's the thing, we're not trying to make it null here, because it would have never sounded the same. Even if I took two Voyagers, they wouldn't have sounded the same. That's the magic with analog vintage gear. It's different, it's imperfect, but listen to it. This is the original. Ours. There's ways to make digital sound like vintage analog, but you need to spend some time in it. And the more you randomize things and you use the same randomization oscillators and just map it into different things and make it imperfect, add a little bit of distortion, add some chorus, that's how you get the typical vintage analog synth sound. Let me know if you got it right in the comparison, if you were able to realize which one is the analog synth and which one is the digital free plugin. By the way, this is free. This is a free plugin that you can just pull in your DAW and just recreate the same thing. But what we did here is go 80–90% of the way there to sounding like a $4,000 vintage synthesizer for basically $0, right? Let me know what you guys think. Do you think I got close? You can use the concepts that we've talked about here today and implement them in your productions. You can use these with any software synth. You can do the same thing with Serum, Vital, Helm, Pigments, any soft synth out there. You can basically do the same things, and this will give an extra layer of depth and interest in your productions, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for more content like this. I'm planning to do a lot of mixing content as well. I'm a mixing engineer primarily. I'm also a recording engineer and a producer. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great day.